In today's podcast with crypto asset manager Nick Black, we talk about Nick's wild early life as a professional MMA fighter, bodyguard, and mercenary in the French Foreign Legion. You'll get a cheat sheet for predicting how high individual crypto prices are going to jump in the short run. Nick names names of people who are building crap or scammy products in the crypto space. You'll discover why crypto may be the last opportunity for humans to meaningfully acquire wealth. Nick's going to spill the dirt on one of the biggest questions in crypto. Who is Satoshi, the inventor of Bitcoin? You're going to get Nick's 5T formula for analyzing if a crypto is worth investing in, plus the truth behind NFTs. My name is Henry Bingaman. This is Getting Out of the Machine. Nick Black, welcome to Getting Out of the Machine.
I love getting out of machines.
How many machines have you been stuck in?
Well, only all the stuff you see on Blade Runner, the hopeful machines, the sex robots and all that kind of stuff.
You've been stuck.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I guess the best place to get stuck. So I was looking up your bio, and I got some. You've lived a very interesting life so far.
I've been around,
to say the least. So correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, because I found it on the internet, and you know how reliable that can be.
Yeah, that's true.
You were in the Navy. You've been a professional MMA fighter. You were a bodyguard for the Hollywood elite, and then at some point you joined the French Foreign Legion, which is, I guess, a mercenary essentially. Then you came back to the States, you did some security consulting. You've published books, like everything from fiction to books on training your mind. And then you got into the gold business for a little bit. And that was all before you got into crypto, which is what we're going to talk a lot about today. So did I get all that right? Did I miss anything big in there?
Yeah. And my background, my educational background is not crypto and gaming and all that. It is more psychology and philosophy and game theory. And so when I got into gold, then it necessitated a deeper dive into macroeconomics and then small e economics and just kind of understanding how, because when you're in the gold business, it makes sense to understand how fake money floats around, because a lot of people, and I was a gold bug too, right? I had all the bumper stickers and all hard money, God's money, all that kind of stuff. And in that context, it made sense. And I was bought in, but then you have to go and kind of do the research. Well, you don't have to do anything, but I felt like I wanted to understand if this is such good money, if precious metals, and I was in the whole kind of panoply of assets. It was gold, silver, platinum, palladium, rhodium, iridium, ruthenium, diamonds. So the whole jewelry market. But as a refiner, we were on the back end of it, buying stuff, melting stuff, making bricks, sending them out across the world, making coins, all the kind of ways you could just make money on the other side of the precious metals business. But in that, I needed to kind of, for my own sanity, look a little bit deeper about what was behind, Fed funds and yield curves and repo, and understanding, where does fiat money go? Where does fiat money come from? The difference between money and currency, and what price and value, how those are completely different. And just all of these things that you might misunderstand coming from an older kind of, the Keynesian kind of economics background that people get out of college with, which is just inherently and tragically a flawed view of the world. And that's why a lot of these people, they'll get out with a nice degree through nepotism or handshakes. They'll find themselves at Goldman Sachs or at one of these nice houses, or they'll promote into some position of incompetence, and they never had the right fundamentals. Only now they have a huge book. They have lots and lots of money and still flawed understanding of how money actually works and how currency works. So I didn't want to be that dude. Not that I had any aspirations to manage big money. I just thought I want to make sure that I'm not missing something very huge. And so that's kind of what sent me down that path, what led me to the digital asset space.
Yeah, I'm curious about the way you kind of think about how you've approached your career before we get into more deep crypto stuff. Like in my case, when I was 22, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to be poor. So I, tried starting to sell an ebook online, and that didn't really work, but the copywriting thing did. So I just kept leaning into the copywriting and leveraging different parts of that to keep advancing my career till I got to, where I was. But you started in MMA and then became an author and then went into gold. So I'm just kind of curious, what's your mindset and how do you trace that line through your career just from the beginning? Usually people build on things. You seem to have taken directionally different turns.
No, I didn't really have a career path. I just did what felt like it was fun. It felt like it was fun to train, but at the same time I was training, in mixed martial arts. I was also like sales. Like I did sales. I worked with a big gym company. They may be the biggest now. And I helped develop sales outlines for their sales managers, their training managers, their teams to use to go and sell, and then to train other salespeople to go and train so that you could sell stuff legally. And, like sales, everybody's like, sales is kind of this big gross thing, but I kind of reduce it to, well, one, all of life is sales, right? If you're going on a date, that's a kind of sales. If you're meeting someone, that's sales. If you're negotiating a car, it's all sales. Our entire life is transactional, really. And so selling a thing is, in my opinion, helping someone do something that they can't or won't do on their own for their benefit. Now, a lot of people sell stuff that doesn't kind of qualify under the for their benefit part of that sensor, but
the person buying it believes it's for their benefit. The only reason they buy it.
Selling someone a gym membership, selling someone a healthcare thing, if it's a legitimate product, selling someone a service that might make their house better, or whatever it is. There are many good services out there, like in our economy. There are good quality things that would make people's life materially better. And if you can lead someone to that conclusion, again, making a decision that they can't or won't on their own that benefits them, then I think that understanding the idea of selling and that kind of transactional communication is super important. And once I had that in the back of my brain, then just everything got easier. And so I kind of bounced around, and I also didn't do any one thing. I did many, many things. I was writing at the same time as I was in school, at the same time as I was training. I mean, MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Muay Thai were just a hobby. And then someone was like, dude, they'll pay us to go over here and fight. You get to fight. There's going to be chicks and everything. I was like, okay, let's do it. But that was really more like the dude bucket list. I never had any aspirations to fight professionally. And I did cross that line. There was a moment where I got asked to go fight at the UFC, and I did not do it. Now, there were other reasons I didn't do it, but the main reason this is not something that I see. It just didn't seem like a career thing to me. And I thought, and maybe this is the wrong way to look at it, but I thought, you know what? You can be so great in any sport, and the second you have a bad day or a bad year, everyone checks out. They write you off.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite in finance. You can do terrible and no one writes you off. You can be awful. And as long as you manage a big pile of money, people don't remember that you blew up all that money. They just remember, oh, that guy managed $4 billion. Let's give him more money, because it's the craziest thing. So it's the exact intellectual opposite. And there's probably a whole discussion embedded in there. That's another day for another time. But anyway, I was doing all of this stuff all at the same time. And I just went wherever there was a little pile of money. And I thought, well, I'll land on something good. And security consulting paid really good. I mean, like for a decent consultant, which again, the lines are kind of security consultant, contractor, mercenary, like all these things are kind of skewed. If someone hires you to do some security-ish service, they should be paying you about $20K a month, which is pretty good money.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right. And then you kind of weigh that with like, where are you working? Like if you're working, like I was on the border of Mexico for a while, not good money because it's not worth it. Right. And if you're in a town where the motto is here, you get killed for free, go to another town.
I can second
that was.
Yeah. So actually your path actually does make a lot of sense to me, because one of the things I've noticed about you, just having watched you operate a little bit, is you get into something and then you optimize the hell out of it. Like you squeeze all the juice out of that potential opportunity. So it makes sense in sales, you were developing systems, not just selling memberships. And in MMA, it makes sense that, you went as far as you could until it didn't make sense anymore. There was nothing left there that would benefit you over the long run. So you walked away. So that does make the career path does make sense to me.
But I will say this, to my credit, I only had 5 pro fights, but I won them all. And I had two little belts in 2 kind of small, big events, but the exposure I got was really cool. And I got to, in a couple of those fights, I got to kind of figure out, okay, well, because you watch those on pay-per-view and you go, I wonder what it's like. Part of you is like, yeah, I could do that. The other part of it is like, I wonder, could I really do that? Like, as a guy, you ask yourself these things. Well, as in anybody, you ask yourself these things. There's some tough women in the UFC. So, but in general, it was just me, like, I needed to check that off. Like, okay, whether I'm uncomfortable in this or not, I need to go out there and do it. Because I had trained because it was fun. I had trained in jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and boxing for so long. I said, well, it would be a shame to not really see. So great. But once I had seen a few times, I was like, okay, cool. And I said, could this be a forever career? No, not really. You don't look at, there's not too many like ex-boxers, ex-fighters that are, curing hunger or finding misidentified nucleotides in a genome, or just doing anything that moves humanity forward. But in finance, there is, either through success in philanthropy or just in financial kind of education, you can take a large corpus, a large group of people, and you can introduce them to stuff that they've not been introduced to, and you can meaningfully change their decision-making process. And then you can have a big net effect. So I thought that's what kind of magnetized or like led me in that direction.
Yeah. So, the podcast is called Getting Out of the Machine. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you specifically about crypto is, first, I think crypto is going to play a big part in the future. And if you own your own money, you're much more independent, right? It's about maximizing your own personal freedom. And I think you have a vision for what that's going to look like, the future of crypto. But, second, a lot of the crypto bros out there, the guys that are tweeting hodl and to the moon and, laser eyes all day, I don't think they know what they're doing. Like, a lot of them got lucky and they bought 500 Bitcoin at, $5, and now they're multimillionaires and they somehow think they're financial geniuses. But you've actually worked your way up and you've really analyzed all of these things and thought about it. Those same guys are making fun of the people that bought Ethereum at $10 and saying they got lucky. Like, there's just a lot of crypto bros that I don't think actually understand what crypto is, but you actually have a real theory of and understanding, and you actually go in and read the white papers. And the third reason I want to talk to you is because it was after one of our conversations last November that I put 6 figures into crypto, and I've kept going. It was November.
Of course, it was at the all-time crypto highs. But you know what? When you stretch it out into infinity, an all-time high is just another blip on the slow path of exception, adoption, use, utility. But yeah, it was funny. I had a couple of clients come to me in November, and the markets were uncharacteristically high, and I was always a little bit reluctant to tell people to lean into crypto at that point. I was like, dollar cost average, just buy quality assets. Maybe it keeps going up, but sure feels like we're at the top of a swing set, and I didn't know either, but I did start taking some stuff where it was a little toppy. Now, for me, my stable coin is Bitcoin. So I took a lot of my gains and put them in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin summarily sold off 50%. However, oddly, a lot of these other assets sold off to a greater extent, and I'm still, better off. Like, if I look at the beginning of 2021 and where we are now, I'm still better off. So even though it went up and it came right down, everybody's like, oh, the whole thing has crashed. If you've been dollar cost averaging into quality assets and quality teams where the idea and the proposition makes sense, you're still probably okay. And even if the assets you own are down, it doesn't really matter, because these things will come back up as the greater markets melt back up. And then the other side is the IQ, the DNA of the aggregate investor in the digital asset space, and probably the equity space to an extent, during November, December, was the dumbest. It's the lowest IQ, barely enough to sustain breathing while you're sleeping. Like really low, barely human IQ, because you had a lot of people and there's a variety of mechanisms, through transfer payments, bad behavior, sit on your couch, don't pay rent, don't pay your car payment, all of this kind of craziness that was going on through COVID. That money, some of it seeped in to the markets. It seeped in to the equity space through this kind of chase for growth and forget fundamentals. And obviously that's starting to unwind. The Kathy Woods, the Teslas are starting to come down to earth, and, reality is starting to set in again. And then you have, other places where you go, okay, where did the funny money go, the transfer money? But you knew also, I think we all knew that had to unwind to an extent as well, right? Like the funny money had to come back out at some point. And not just crypto funny money, but just the funny money that has been showered on these markets at the same time as people have been sitting on their couch. That had to come back out of the market. You can't print productivity. You can't print growth. You can only fake it for so long, right?
Yeah.
And so the end of the faking it, late November, December, January, February, March. Yeah, it had, but now, oddly, no one likes these markets being red, but this is where money's made. Now you're buying and you're seeing quality. You're seeing teams that are building and you're seeing the ones that are not. So you're seeing the truth. What Warren Buffett says, like, you only see who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. We're seeing that now. And what you're seeing is a more truthful market. Now you can invest, and you also have kind of a cheat sheet, right? You can look at November and say, well, that's where we were. The crypto is not over. They're not they didn't build 200-story skyscrapers and get to the 199th floor and say, the price of the token's down, so we're going to fold it up, guys. Let's grab your hammer and your hard hat. Let's just go home. Like, they're not stopping. The non-quality projects are disappearing, which is great, but you have a cheat sheet. You have a November cheat sheet. And if you have the weak assumption that I do, that prices will go, and again, price is not the measure, but prices is the way people tend to measure things, will go back to where they at least were in November, then there is a lot of money simply for the November trade. Just that trade alone. You don't have to know anything about crypto. You can look at the cheat sheet and you can just say, what are quality assets? Which ones are punished? And if I were to have exposure to those at these prices, what would that mean? That's a pretty good return. So I think even if you don't believe in the crypto space, you've got to see that arbitrage.
Hey, it's Henry. Sorry to butt in here, but I think you'll appreciate this. If you want to know the exact cryptos that Nick and I discussed last year when I was first starting to build out my 6-figure crypto portfolio, you're in luck, because I actually recorded that whole conversation. I went back and found the section where Nick and I discussed the exact cryptos I should consider and how much I would buy of each. Now, this isn't investment advice, but this is pretty much how my portfolio turned out. So if you want to know the top 6 cryptos that Nick and I both like and how to weight them in your portfolio, go to henryb.co/Nick and you can get that video for free. That's henryb, henryb.co/Nick. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is a danger in the crypto space right now is a lot of people are talking, about regulation, this big crash, and oh my gosh, all these people lost all this money and we need to regulate this market. But I see it as, because it's so unregulated, you're actually going to clean out the crap. And if you put in regulations, there's going to be some, I guess I don't want to name names, but some cryptocurrencies that don't really deserve to be there, but they're big enough that they're going to get regulated. The competition is going to get regulated out from them. Like, what do you see on the horizon as far as the crypto regulation? And is there good regulations that can be had, which I tend to be skeptical of, but just, I guess, what do you predict in that front?
So I think you look at it game theoretically. So if I was to say, okay, do you think there will be regulation in crypto? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, it's coming, 100%. Okay, so since it's coming, that's now a strong assumption. So let's put that off to the side. Regulation is coming. Would you rather operate in a pre or post-regulation environment as a developer? Pre or post? I'm developing something, I don't have regulation yet, versus I'm developing something and I know what the rules are.
Right.
So pre or post?
Since you know the rules are coming, you want to know what they are.
You want to know what they are. Okay, cool. So let's make that another strong assumption. So from the development side, regulation's coming. You just assume it's going to come. It's like, okay, get here as quick as possible. So I know what the rules are. So I'm not building off of a cliff or into a dead end. Right.
Yeah.
So from a developing standpoint, they welcome quality projects and quality teams, welcome thoughtful regulation. And you've already had the thumbs up from the Biden administration. The world has been put on notice that digital products are coming, and that's just the way it is. You can either get on board and participate, or you can just watch it happen, right? Digital proxy assets, stable assets issued by governments are coming. Whether you like it or not, they are just coming. It's like getting mad at the sunset. Well, it's going to come again tomorrow. You know that. Like, there's no way around it. So great. It's better for developers. It's better for communities. It's better for, now this is the part, for investors. This is where it gets a little tricky. It's not so simple. Do you wait for regulation and then invest? I say no. I say no because you may have missed it.
You may have missed it, but you may also invest in that one that's already over the cliff. Like, I guess if you diversify.
This is true. This is where the game theory is not in the development side. Developers are going to develop, quality projects are going to continue to build. That won't change. They will be made better after regulation. Their course will be simpler. The investors have the hardest job right here. And that's why it reduces again to finding quality products. When you looked like the blow up recently with Terra Luna, this didn't surprise anybody except the dumbest and lowest IQ on the planet Earth. Because let's put it in a simple way. I say, I'm going to create funny money token, Nick token. You buy Nick token and burn it for Nick USD. Cool. All right. So it's Nick USD is equal to $1 all the time. You might say, well, how? How do you keep
what's backing it?
What's backing it? Well, funny money Nick token. You're like, but that doesn't seem so stable. Okay, no, but don't worry. If you park it over here in Anchor, I'm going to pay you 20% annual return on Nick USD. And then you might say, 20% of what? Like, where do you get the 20% that you're showering me with? I'm like, well, it's easy. I'm making money by selling funny money Nick token. So, by the way, that's the shape of a pyramid. No surprise. So nowhere, when you looked at Terra and that whole system, nowhere did that look safe. At no point did that look legitimate. I mean, it's like, you remember the underwear gnomes, the episode of South Park? Step 1, steal the underwear. Step 2 and step 3, profit.
Right.
You say, well, wait, what's step 2? You're like, no, step 1, steal the underwear. Step 2 and step 3, profit. There was never a step 2 with these algorithmic stablecoins. You say, well, wait a minute, forget it. Let's forget that it looks weird. Maybe this guy running it is awesome. This guy that's always on Twitter, oddly enough, even though he runs this big company, who's always cussing people out on Twitter that don't believe in the vision. And he's always calling out scammy projects. Okay, cool. Well, what's he done? What's Do Kwon done? Oh, that's right. Basis Cash, where he evaporated another $2 billion, not even 2 years ago. Oh, weird. So the only other thing he's done was a quasi Ponzi scheme. Now this is even a bigger one. And everywhere you look at it. So any way you looked at this project, it was absolute stupid, peak stupid. A 6-year-old would have said this is, so anybody that lost money, anyone that lost money in Terra or UST, or they had it stuck on Anchor, they absolutely deserve to lose everything, because it means you're owning stuff that you don't understand. And not only do you not understand it, but just a very cursory 13-second cognitive, just a basic, just say it out loud and you start to feel like sick to your stomach. Like BitConnect, 1% a day, every day, forever. You go, no, man, that's not possible, right? That sounds so stupid. But Terra Luna was no less stupid. And it's not just them. I don't blame them. These algorithmic stable coins that have funny money on one side and a stable asset, your first question, well, what makes it stable? Yes, you don't need to get past that. And what happens is people go, forget about that. They see Luna going up and they go, I ain't complaining about them gains though. But you can go to Vegas and continue to be lucky at roulette, but luck is not a strategy. You don't wake up in the morning and go, today I'm going to be lucky. What? That's not a strategy. That's not a teachable, repeatable strategy.
There's
people got caught up in the gains.
There's an aspect to it though, where it's not necessary, and not on some of those stable coins, but on some of the actual like tokens and cryptos where it's not luck, but it's marketing, right? They know how to sell their coin, even though there's nothing behind it. So would you invest in a team that like, I mean, would you try to go for those short-term gains because this team knows how to market it?
No.
No, you just don't play.
Because I don't want to wake up on a Tuesday morning at 3 a.m. and all my stuff's gone. Yeah. And that's what happened to $60 billion worth of people last week or 2 weeks ago. And so you have to tell, this is just my point of view. I'm not a gambler. I'm very frugal for the most part. And so I just don't think it's wise to buy stuff that at any moment could completely unwind. And if you're buying because marketing or buying because some guy is just a big mouthpiece on, I don't know when Twitter became a place where financial knowledge was traded. In my opinion, it's still not. When you're listening to these gurus, these self-appointed gurus, they're either criminals or idiots. There's no in between. You either don't know what you're selling and you're an idiot. And again, an idiot might not be stupid. They just might not want to do the research. They might not take the time. So you're an idiot. Okay, you can be an idiot. I've been an idiot before. I was speeding. The speed limit went down to like 45. I was going like 70. I get me a ticket. Why? Because I was being an idiot. Now I learned and I don't speed in that area and I pay attention. But you're either an idiot or you're a criminal, meaning you know that it's a scam and you pump it because you're getting good. They are your exit liquidity. There's a great meme picture that's a guy looking in the mirror and pointing, and he says, "You will not be their exit liquidity." Right? Don't be the money for the person getting out of the asset that they're thumping on society. Just the garbage. And it happens so much. And because this space is so confusing, most people fall victim at least once to one of these dumb projects. They get sucked up in it. They get sucked in the hype. They see it going up. They're like, what if everybody is going to be rich except for me? I don't want to be the only person that didn't get rich this week. And, recency bias and FOMO and all these emotions kick in and you make a dumb decision. And at 3 a.m., all your money's gone.
Yeah, I actually have separate accounts. I have my gambling account and then my investment account, right? So if you want to have fun, just set it aside and know what you're doing. Like, I don't mind the people that, they want to put $50 into Dogecoin and see what happens. But if you're putting, 50,000 in, you're not thinking it through very clearly. Separate those out. But the emotion starts to cross lines. And while that sounds good, it makes sense. It's actually not logical. You can't divest yourself of emotion over here, but be intensely emotional over here. You can't partition those things. Your investment intellect, it's across both. I always laugh when people go, I just go to Vegas for the fun of it. I don't care what happens. I don't care if I lose. Bull. Not true. No one doesn't care if they lose. Otherwise, because then if there's no emotional response to it, if there's no benefit, then why are you doing it? Now, if someone says, I go to Vegas to drink for free. Okay, that's weird, but I get it. You go to a casino, and I guess if you sit there, you're drinking for free by spending $800 an hour. That's what I was thinking. That's the most expensive free drinking I've ever heard of.
You're drinking for free. So, but that too is a rationalization. I do all sorts of things. You know what I do for almost free? I go to Santa Monica, I go to the beach, and I go hang out for almost free because I got to pay for parking. Although I have kind of gamed that, but that's almost free, right? But if there was a blackjack table on the beach, and I go to the beach for the water and the sun. Oh yeah, and for the gambling. Gambling is just a dangerous part of our kind of DNA. We always like this idea that we could put in like one currency unit and somehow we spin it into some miraculous, we're rich forever. Like the universe just gave us. But the better way to do that is if you're in a new, this is why the crypto space is so interesting. It is a brand new asset class, the first in many hundreds of years. And it may be the only opportunity for us, right? Maybe for us, like as in humans, to meaningfully come up. There's not going to be another one of these because we're going to reach artificial general intelligence, I believe, before the next new asset class. People are like, no, but the internet boom, that was the technology shift. The last asset class was late 1600s when the bond market was created to finance the war between the British and the French. And that's the bond market. This is the next one. So bond market, 1696, crypto, 2008, if you count when the Bitcoin white paper was dropped, and cognitively, this idea that we could have this peer-to-peer payments network that was disintermediated, there was no central authority, and yada, yada. It's been 300 something years. What is the likelihood that those of us that are alive are going to see another new asset class? And what is the likelihood that humans will even be able to participate? Because the robots will be doing the next one, right?
Right.
We're not that far away. And so then you say, what if this is my last at bat? And I'm not trying to be anecdotal or use hyperbole. I think this is our last at bat. I think this is the last chance humans have to meaningfully compete in a brand new asset class that won't be dominated by very, very complex, self-fixing, self-reorganizing entities that manage almost every aspect of our life. Because then any arbitrage, any value dislocation will be arbed out by the computers to create some universal basic income and shower everybody, whatever, right? I don't know what that dystopian future looks like, but I think this is our last chance. And so I want to be early in that last chance. I do think we're early still.
So what do you say to the people that think it's not a new asset class, it's just a new asset, the Bitcoin maximalists? Because there's actually some smart people that are in that camp that have made a lot of money. But you recommend a lot of different tokens and cryptos. So how do you address that? Bitcoin solves everything and there's nothing but Bitcoin.
It's just a clearly flawed statement. It's a flawed look at the space. Nothing solves everything. It's just a very arrogant, I was here first approach. And there's a thing called injury by intelligence. You can be smart and you can unfortunately be perverted into thinking that you're smart in all areas. I use the example, like I know this guy who is probably the best Lamborghini mechanic on the planet. I'm not joking. He listened to my car, listened on the phone and said, oh, you know what? There's a vibration that I didn't hear, by the way, while we were talking about nothing to do with cars. He said, what car are you in? I said, a Huracan. What year? 21. He says, a drop top, isn't it? I said, oh, yeah. He said, yeah, there's a bolt underneath the drop mechanism, some thing that bolts loose. They probably hand tightened it. When was the last time it was serviced? I was like, no, I didn't service it. He goes, you know what? They pulled the top. That's probably a new top. They didn't put, I'm like, what are you talking about? I can't hear. I took it in. They took the whole thing apart. There was a bolt that was hand tightened because exactly what he said, listening to a phone call while I was hauling ass down 405. All this is to say, he is a genius. I would not let him maybe manage my money, right? I probably wouldn't get dating advice from him, but in this one thing, there's a good chance he is Stephen Hawking level genius. There is an injury through intelligence when we're intelligent, and we have this assumption that I'm intelligent in one space means an overall wide range intelligence. And that's just not true. And I think that our emotions can pervert us. My brother was a early miner. He mined in 2010, 11. He was banking about 15 Bitcoin a day for years. I think he over 2,000 Bitcoin. He's the worst dude with money on the planet. The worst. Now, he's a genius software developer. So if you got software development problems, he's the dude. He's like the Lamborghini guy, but he's the last guy in the world that should be managing your money. So that there are some dislocations in areas where intellectual ability doesn't quite spread. Because the better you get at a certain thing, when you narrow your focus on a field, you tend to not notice these other things. And I just think that is missed. And so you get these guys like Adam Back, and who, by the way, is probably Satoshi, Adam and Hal Finney and these other guys. That's a whole other thing. But You get these guys, the Bitcoin maxis, that are educated. Michael Saylor is a great example of a very well-educated, very intelligent dummy because he's a compulsive gambler and he's made some incredibly non-fiduciary decisions for MicroStrategy that a competent fiduciary would never in a million years make, because you don't do that with public money. There's certain things you don't do. You can do things for yourself in your own portfolio. You can blow it up. You can take gambles and risks, and you can borrow against your Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin, which is madness. But when you do it with public money in a company, and again, not to get off on a tirade, but he's an example of a guy that people are, they are just gloss-eyed at his education, MIT kind of DNA, that he's an engineer and he's a visionary, but he is a gambler and he's dangerous. And if you don't see that, you can be sucked up into that whirlwind. And there are a lot of other ideologues the same way. Any of these communities, when you become a maximalist on any of this stuff, you're off the rails, because you can't believe in Bitcoin. If you do believe in Bitcoin, you should believe in Algorand, because Silvio, he was probably responsible for 80% of what was in the Bitcoin white paper. They absolutely stood on his shoulders when they created Bitcoin. He's quoted more than anyone else. So if you like Bitcoin, then you probably like the DNA of the father of Bitcoin. You could argue that Silvio Macaulay is a big part of that, at least intellectually. So you should go, I wonder what else he likes. What else is he interested in? This is an intelligent guy. You say, okay, what are they doing at Algorand? Well, that's interesting. I want to look at that. And so that's the way I think. What I don't think is it's only Bitcoin and nothing else, because that doesn't make any sense. The world is more complicated than a peer-to-peer payment network that doesn't work for peer-to-peer. And they even admit it. When the Bitcoin maxis, not to get off on a Bitcoin rant, but when the Bitcoin maxis or any maxi say, my coin, an example, Bitcoin, my coin's going to do it. It does everything. It doesn't do everything. It doesn't do quick transactions. It doesn't run smart contracts. They're like, oh, no. We'll do it on our own layer too. Well, then you're admitting that there are other layers. There are other potentials. There are other potentiations and iterations. And if something's done on a layer 2, well, why couldn't you just have an alternative asset accomplish that? Does it detract from Bitcoin because Bitcoin's not a panacea for all things finance? No. Bitcoin has a wonderful place. It has a lot of value. It has a lot of use utility, worldwide adoption. It's amazing for many things, but it's a small group of many things, right? And there are so many other things that need fixing in the world that Bitcoin alone doesn't solve. And so it's just a very arrogant, very unintelligent view that any one of these assets solves the world's problems.
So just assuming that some of the people watching this are kind of beginners or new to the crypto space, can you explain the difference between the layers, the protocol layers?
So a cool way to think about it is layer 0. And again, there's a couple of other ways people describe this, but the way I visualize it, layer 0 is the internet. Okay. Layer 1 think of them as the concrete laid over the internet. If the internet is the ground, right, where all of this excitement is taking place, then you have the layer 1s, the protocols, the concrete. And in the concrete are smart contracts and the ability to spin up tokens based on those protocols. But again, to keep it simple, you got the internet, that's our layer 0. Our layer 1 are these smart contract platforms, the infrastructure of the future. Now, what will be built on top of that infrastructure? Well, just like roads, they will build commercial, they'll build real estate, highways, and all this kind of cool stuff. And they'll build housing developments and all this, but you don't know what they're going to build because that's in the future. But you have this clean place to build. So decentralized applications, the kind of things that we would play with like on our phone, and decentralized banking and decentralized finance, and many of these somewhat decentralized value propositions, the little bits and pieces of the future, they will be built on top of these protocol layers, on top of that infrastructure. So those would be layer 2s. And then there are occasionally little layers that sit in the middle that just make things on layer 1 occur a little bit more elegantly, but they're not quite public facing. So you could call those like layer 1.5s, right? For a while.
Example of that?
So for a while, Matic was a great example of a layer kind of 1.5, layer 2. It made things easier than Ethereum. It helped to scale Ethereum through a variety of things. One is another example, Harmony. And there's lots of companies where their only reason to exist is to help scale Ethereum, to essentially run transactions in another place, batch those transactions and post those back to Ethereum at some interval so that you could have a lot of traffic happening outside the bandwidth constraints of Ethereum. And similar, Lightning Network does a similar function for Bitcoin. Little bitty transactions can happen, little small, I can buy coffee and this and that. Again, that's the future, the goal, the hope is that little transactions would happen in the Lightning Network, and at some interval, they would post those back to Bitcoin, which has the 10-minute blocks and, the security and kind of the slow and clunkiness, which is what makes it so secure, which is really valuable. But that you could have that layer 2 assist in the scaling, right? But make no mistake, that is a separate layer with its own security considerations and design considerations and maybe, flaws in code and things like that. So layer 0 is the internet. Layer 1 are these infrastructure, these solid infrastructure. Ethereum was probably the first real infrastructure layer, followed by, and not followed in direct chronology, but the team at Ethereum, they blew up and Vitalik stayed with Ethereum. Charles Hoskinson goes and creates Cardano, and they have kind of a principled peer review, kind of university academic first approach. You have Gavin Wood, who wrote Solidity, Dr. Gavin Wood. He leaves Ethereum and he starts Polkadot. And that's a little bit more like a move fast and break stuff kind of approach, but they actually ended up using Cardano's consensus mechanism, Ouroboros. But anyway, and you start to see them flourish, and then more layer 1s appear, and some of them are good and some of them are scammy. But you have Tron, which basically was just a copy and paste. Matter of fact, at one point they literally had parts of the Ethereum white paper in the Tron white paper. And someone was like, that's directly plagiarizing. And Justin Sun was like, come on, man, let's move past this. Like, you mean move past the part where you just copied and pasted their white paper? He's like, yeah, let's move past this. So anyway, it's not all good behavior in the crypto space. Oddly enough, whenever there's like this gold rush, you're going to see a lot of kind of crooks and frauds come into the space and pilfer. And a lot of that has happened. But there are good quality layer 1 assets, which I believe Web3 will be built on top of.
But you can't say there's not bad motivations and actors in the stock market, or like anywhere there's money gathered, there's some crooked people. I want to go back to something you were talking about. I think it was injury by intelligence. One of the concepts you introduced me to, or one of the things you introduced me to, was Charlie Munger's 25 Cognitive Biases book. So you really dig into, like, I think game theory is a big part of how you analyze and think about the crypto market. Can you kind of walk me through how, like, the game theory that you put into your analysis? Like, what are the big factors you're looking for, like macro?
Well, that's a rich question, because macro requires an understanding of macroeconomics. I think that most people don't have a great understanding. By the way, Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson is a great place to start. It's macroeconomics, and true economics is game theory. I mean, they kind of are not one without the other, because if you put any two players in a strategic environment, there's going to be some math underneath their decision making, and if you understand the math, then you understand what you can identify what the rule set is. What are the rules? What are the assumptions for this particular game? And a game, I'm just saying that colloquially, as any two entities competing for anything, whether it's the favor of some young maiden's hand, or it's some economic advantage, or two oil companies competing for land, or some trade agreement between two countries. At any point, you want to understand the rule set. So you have an assumption of what the rules are. What are the fixed kind of facts related to the game? Again, understanding the rules, understanding what's in this game, and you want to make it as simple as possible. And then that the outcomes are very specific because the incentives are very specific. And Charlie Munger, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcomes. We are incentive-based creatures, right? The first question that a human asks, like on a subconscious level, when presented with anything new, is, can I do it, and what's in it for me? Right? So that's game theory, right? That's kind of an evolutionary game theory, and evolution itself is a game theoretical process, which kind of mets out useful mutation from just mutation, and then occasionally creates some offspring, and then they create offspring, and they have more sex, and they make more babies, and they dominate a niche, and that's you can propagate that out for last infinite. So game theory is reducing any scenario to the simplest form, looking at the incentives and the outcomes, and assuming that these two players are rational. Now, we could probably agree that markets are not a lot of times completely rational, but they eventually rationalize out. So, and the best you can do is imagine what two really smart people or two really smart players would do against each other, because everything else is whimsical, and you need to start somewhere. So you find the incentives, you find the assumptions. What are the rules of the game? What are the incentives? And if these two players are rational, then what would make sense for how would they behave against each other in this competitive environment to maximize their output, to maximize their payoffs?
Right. I think you could
that can be extrapolated. Yeah.
You can actually say that markets are entirely rational if you can understand all the incentives everywhere, which you can't.
Yes. And if there's information symmetry.
Yeah.
And the problem in the equity space is there's a huge asymmetry, because people get information that's not public, not publicly available, and they trade and behave off of that. And it absolutely happens. Well, we know it happens in Congress, so we know, it's very clear, right? Like, so in the digital asset space, at least, there may be some developmental information that we're not all privy to. There may be some partnerships that we're not all privy to, but the second it happens, we're made aware of it. And we can see on-chain metrics. At 3 a.m., if someone's moving tokens around, you can see it. And there's a lot of value in that. I don't know when Apple is getting ready to buy back stock, or when they're doing some balance sheet mechanics to dodge taxes or this. I don't know when the government's going to, spend 300 billion more in defense spending they certainly haven't messaged me and asked if I was aware of it. So there's so many things in the traditional investing space where there is huge information asymmetries, dislocations, and you can't meaningfully cognitively compete. But in the digital asset space, because most or all of this is on chain and it's searchable, I think there's a lot of value in that. And there's less information asymmetry, meaning you can compete with a hedge fund, you can compete with a VC in the crypto space because game theory. And while game theory, again, it doesn't have to do with like playing Call of Duty, although that's it does sound like that. But the more you dig into game theory, you start to realize that game theory and economics are very closely partnered. And cognitive bias is the thing that gets in the way of you making game theoretical decisions. Cognitive bias are all of these little kind of mental hurdles and speed bumps that we have ingrained in our personalities through years of nature and nurture that create statistical deviations in rational thinking. And you want to be a rational thinker. You want to be a critical thinker, a rational player. That puts you over on the game theory side, right? Just reduce it to math. And I have found, and again, this is just my way, but I found if you reduce everything to simple math, there's no space left for emotion. So you don't get caught up in, I got to keep up with it. I don't care. I never invested in Terra Luna. I didn't care. Some of my clients did. I warned them against it. I saved most of them from getting punished, not all of them, because there was people that even when it depegged, they wouldn't listen. I don't know what to tell you. But if you can reduce the emotion out of all these things and get rid of this idea that you have to catch every single thing that goes up ever, like you only have 100% of your balance sheet. So if some weird asset goes up, people are like, oh, I got to have it. Why? It's a fraud. Yeah, but it's going up. Okay, but were you going to put everything into that one random asset? No, that's not sensible. And is that going to materially change your life? Weighed with all the worry and stress of being in a crap project and wondering when they're going to get, nuked to zero. So you don't have to catch them. It's not Pokemon, right? Investing is not Pokemon. You don't need to catch them all. Have a small handful of quality assets that you can apply game theory to, that you can try to get out of the way of your own cognitive bias. And then it becomes not emotional, not stressful, and managing money becomes very easy. And because most people won't do any of the stuff we just talked about at all, ever, you start to rise among your peers because you just make better decisions than the rest of them. And it's like being at the campfire. If a bear approaches, you don't start running. You tie your shoe and look for the fat kid, because you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun the fat kid.
Right.
And in this market, it's all fat kids.
So what's the game theory? I know you have your like 5 T's kind of framework for analyzing some of these tokens. Can you go through that quickly?
Yeah. So, and again, because there's so much noise and there's so much cross current and weird information in the crypto space, and it is a lot. And I wanted to have some way of kind of distilling how I look at a project, and just to get a basic idea. And so, myself and my buddy Steve and Dave, we came up with a way. By the way, Steve Wisniewski, a little shout out, Hall of Famer, played for the Raiders. So we're all big homies, and we kind of came up with this system, which is you look at the team, you look at the technology, you look at the timing, you look at the tokenomics, and then you ask yourself, why token? Why does this token exist? And if you've done that, if you've meaningfully looked at the team, there's some decent DNA there. And remember, there's not unlimited supply of good developers in crypto. There's a very small amount, and they're already mostly parked in projects. So we've already you can look at the team and go, that's a solid team. That's they could play on Sundays. And then you say, okay, let's look at the technology that they're trying to implement and see if, does this make sense? Like, are they trying to solve time travel? If so, I'm out. If they're trying to break the laws of physics, I'm out. If they're trying to augment or make something better or remove a middleman, I'm in. Then we'll look at, so we've looked at the tokenomics, because also all of these projects have their own monetary and fiscal policy. They become little central banks. So good team, maybe we can score them. I score them 1 to 5, right? I have 5 points. And I look at the technology. Okay, 1 to 5. The timing, did they miss the boat or are they relevant? Like looking at Ripple 5 years ago, yes, relevant. Looking at Ripple now, not relevant, right? So XRP would probably be a pass for me. But again, it would get like a 2 or a 3 of my 5 points that I would give for timing. So we have our team, we have our technology, we have our timing, we have our tokenomics, right? Let's look at the tokenomics and see, are these good fiduciaries? Are they competent? Do they understand math? A great example, Hedera Hashgraph. Awesome. It's a directed acyclic graph project, a gossip protocol. Cool. Everything's cool. Mance and Lehman, awesome dudes. They know nothing about money. So team, sweet-ish. There's not an adult in the room. So that's a problem. But when you get to tokenomics, the whole thing breaks down. They had a poor, when they ran their token offering, it got botched. They said the wrong things to some people. They lied to some people. They omitted some information. So you start getting in there and you go, ooh, this looks real bad. The tokenomics is probably a 0, and then, so you can't, it's tough to get there. And so again, and then you just, at the very end, you say, why token? Great example of the Y token. It checks all the boxes except Y token, the Brave token. The browser is awesome. I'm using it now. Basic attention token, cool. But why are they using that token and not just Ethereum? I mean, it's Ethereum token. There's nothing magical about their token except that it's their token. So it doesn't pass muster for Y token. Now, if it got a 5 on every category except for that last one, that's a 20 out of 25 possible points. I'd probably put it on the book. It's not, by the way, and I'm not holding it. I did participate in the initial sale, and I subsequently ejected because the information changed, and I just felt like, well, it doesn't pass muster anymore. And so, and these things change, right? Like when you kind of do your 5 T's, these things change. New information comes, people get indicted. It happens. It's crypto.
So how often do you go back and reassess? Do you go back every quarter or so and reassess your 5 T's?
I try to every quarter. Yeah. Especially on my core holdings. My 3 or 4 main, I have about 3 or 4 main core assets that I'm really heavy in. And I'm pretty diligent. I mean, probably on those every month. I'm just looking and looking and looking and thinking, if I was to buy right now, build a portfolio, I look at my portfolio value. And if I say I had this many currency units right now, I build a portfolio and I make sure it looks like the other one. If it doesn't, it's time to consider rebalancing.
I want to go back to the Fed token if we can a little bit. It's it's a really hot topic right now. Everybody sees that the incentives of the government are to bring out this Fed token for whatever it is, a UBI or just to combat some of this inflation stuff. Gas is $5 a gallon around me right now. I'm sure you're in LA. It's probably crazier than that.
7.
Oh, that's nuts. But I see a couple challenges they have. Like, first of all, the government might want to implement it, but the Federal Reserve isn't exactly the government. They're kind of like mutated twins in a way, but they're not. The government can't just tell the Fed exactly what to do. And second, wouldn't it cut, like the Fed would be holding everybody's wallets, I would assume, in the way this works. And wouldn't that cut out a lot of the the banking system? Like, banks never let things happen that are bad for their bottom line. So how do you see it? Like, are those actually challenges? Am I looking at it right? Or how do you see it happening?
I think you're looking at it correctly. First of all, I don't think the first iteration of anything is a Fed anything. I think there's a lot of people, even the people in Congress that we don't consider too sharp, they know that the Federal Reserve having real monetary power is dangerous. See, there's an assumption that the Fed's a money dealer. They are not. And this is why the Fed, which, by the way, is a private institution. There's nothing federal about the Federal Reserve. It's as federal as Taco Bell, right? There's nothing federal. It's a private organization. Yes, the chair and the Fed chair and the board of governors, yes, they answer to Congress. They make recommendations and sometimes implement short-term policies that they believe protect price stability and maximum employment. They've never, ever done their job correctly. They've never done it right, and they've never even known what to do. The Treasury has always looked down on the Federal Reserve. The only time that they're on even keel is just because Yellen is now, from being a Fed governor, she's now at the Treasury. That's the only time they even considered themselves peers. The Treasury has never considered the Fed a peer. They've always considered it this kind of broke, insolvent stepchild that never gets it right. The Treasury, ideally, would be the entity that would manage a US dollar stable asset. Okay, a central bank backed US dollar. Now, that would be an implementation that would make sense. You would just have a dollar proxy asset that was backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. What the Federal Reserve does as a set of 12 private banks. So to your other question, now let's forget about the US dollar that comes from the Treasury, which would be in my opinion, the correct way to implement, and I think which will be the way. If the Fed had this asset, see, right now the Fed deals bank reserves. Bank reserves are inner assets that sit on bank balance sheets, a small amount of banks that are in the system, broker dealers, 24 banks. But no one takes bank reserves and goes and buys lumber with them. Bank reserves have no monetary power out in the economy. It's just a balance sheet swap between the Federal Reserve and broker dealers to ideally get them to go and, through lending and credit creation, spur or curtail economic activity. That's it. So, but if we flipped a switch and the Federal Reserve had their own currency that was escaped the banking system and out into the real world, then you do have a whole host of other issues. Then this hyperinflation that everybody worries about, which is not what we're experiencing right now, but which everybody thinks we are. You want to see inflation? You give the Fed an actual printing machine, you will see the inflation that everyone fears. Because then when the Fed starts doing stuff in society, they'll be able to do it in real time. Now, should the Treasury have those powers? I think yes, because I think there is a value to considered monetary policy into society in times of chaos. It might make sense that if a hurricane blows through Houston and a bunch of people are displaced, to be able to put near-term payments directly in someone's wallet that they can use right now to get them through a tough time. Emergency stimulus, very specific stimulus payments to solve a small localized problem. That makes sense to me, right? Showering the whole world with funny money does not make sense. So
but I see
that weapon used correctly makes sense.
But every time you give the government a weapon, they don't use it correctly, in my experience. Of course. So it's
bureaucrats.
Yeah, if you give them that power, it's going to go wrong eventually. So it does scare me more than a lot of other things.
Do the game theory on it. The private banking system as we know it now, forget the Fed, which is private. It's a private banking system of 12 banks. But outside the Federal Reserve, the regular banking system, have they implemented stable coins?
Not that I know of.
No, they haven't. They've tested a little. They're all testing quietly, but none of them have implemented JP Morgan kind of hinting at it and all that, but none of them have implemented a stable asset. So you say, well, wait a minute. These are definitely for-profit banks, as is the Federal Reserve. Again, it's a for-profit organization. So, but the private banking system that can move a lot faster, they haven't done it yet. So that should tell you that at least right now, the banking system is not all that excited about stable assets. They just don't see the juice in it. It makes sense as a treasury function to have a paper dollar, a digital dollar, and a distributed digital dollar, right? Because we're already mostly digital. But having a digital asset that can be transferred wallet to wallet, it doesn't go through the old Swift rails and things like that. It just makes sense from a kind of a technology, an upgrade, a forward kind of promulgation of technology standpoint, right? Just a better mousetrap, a disintermediated digital dollar makes sense. Managed by, the treasury, right? Well, they can already print money out of thin air. They're allowed to. And we can argue about should they be allowed to, but the fact is they're allowed to. And they can do stimulus right now. So they're already allowed to. So just granting that power and extending it to a digital asset, I don't think is a huge mental leap. I think it's coming, and maybe in 4 or 5 years. Now, we know the Chinese, the digital renminbi is here. It's happening. So a lot of these countries can stay on the sidelines, but it is happening everywhere else. So you can sit on your hands, or you can just say, listen, this is the way the world's turned. This is the new way it works. You have a digital currency, or you don't do commerce in real time. You have some delayed commerce function, which looks silly. So everyone, my opinion, all governments to some extent will be put into the digital currency market.
I think the libertarian kind of dream when Bitcoin and the other cryptos first started coming out is that we know a separation of money and state, right? That these could all replace the dollar and the yuan and the ruble and that. But you don't seem to see that ever happening.
I think that the world will go digital. I think the one currency kind of to rule them all will just be digital currencies. A basket of digital currencies that can trade in real time, that looks something like an SDR. But do you have to have dollar hegemony? People don't realize this. The dollar is the world's reserve currency, but it isn't that all commerce is done in the dollar and no commerce is done in other assets. The renminbi right now is only 4 or 5% less used than the dollar. It's just the leper with the most fingers. And, there are a lot of reasons why having the world's reserve currency is not such a good thing. If you dig into Triffin's dilemma and things like that, where if you're responsible for the world's reserve currency, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And you run ever increasing deficits and the thing breaks down really, really quickly. All of these, the lifespan of a currency is 35 years. So of any currency ever. I mean, we're due, right? And a slow backing off of dollar hegemony wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. There is room for all currencies to be like on an exchange, like Coinbase or anywhere else. You don't do all your transactions through Bitcoin or all through Ethereum or all through Cardano or all through Polkadot. You move around when you need to. Ooh, this is better for this. This is better for this. XLM is better for this. Whatever your choice is. And maybe there's a currency that only has this trading pair. And if I want to move lumber from Brazil to, sub-Saharan Africa, maybe the only rail to do that is the digital renminbi. Well, I'm not going to go sit in the dollar and wait 7 days and go through some weird funding quagmire when I can just go digital real to digital renminbi and I got my lumber. Right? So you'll use whatever is easiest. And so by the Chinese getting out in front of this thing, they're telling the world, at least right now, our currency is going to be one of the easiest. Now, you still have to say, well, we have to deal with Chinese, and their fiscal and monetary policy and all this, but we have to already deal with those things in addition to the slow gumminess of the current system. It takes 6 or 7 days. If you send as a bank in the United States money to even one of your banks in London, it's between 5 and 7 days before the money is actually there. It's tracked through the Swift messaging system, but the money is not actually there for a while. So you have all this slippage risk, especially if it's a currency swap, if you're going dollars to euro or something like that. There's whole desks at banks that exist just to deal with slippage. because these transactions are not real time. It's quicker just to put it in a bag, a big bag, and just fly over and do the transaction then, because at least you know the exchange rate. There shouldn't be slippage desks because there shouldn't be slippage.
Right.
Right. And there's not slippage for the most part. There's a little bit of slippage in big transactions just because of the illiquidity in the crypto space. But in a world where we have central bank backed assets, where they have, unlimited funding powers for their sovereign currencies, you're going to have very minimal slippage and the transaction's done. It's just done right then. And done right then, I think, makes the world instantly look a lot better. It's a lot harder to weaponize your currency when people say, well, I don't even have to use your currency. Now, I might park some of my currency in your treasury market, your crypto treasury market, because I want some yield, because I still think US debt might be more valuable, but I don't have to. And I think the whole idea of weaponizing currency is just a really crappy thing for humanity, because who suffers are all the people that live in these various countries that get punished for stuff they have no control over. So you want to end most of that, give people choices on international, make currency trading and international commerce as easy as buying some Bitcoin or some Cardano on Coinbase. Takes like 15 seconds.
Don't you think some of these countries will get a little competitive and, ban certain use? Like, I worry China's already banned Bitcoin, I think, right? Or have at some point.
Nope. They put the brakes on Bitcoin mining, but you can still own Bitcoin. Okay. It's considered property. Yep.
I would. So if they have their own currency and they worry about things debasing or devaluing it, or giving their citizens, they have 1 point however many billion citizens. And if, all those guys are already on digital currency, right? There's no cash in China. I remember reading a story a while ago about somebody that went and robbed like 14 stores in one town in China and got like $4 because nobody uses cash in China already. But so if everybody's already digital and they're not using the Chinese yuan, you don't think they'll come in and try to just ban all those other cryptos?
Well, what good would it do? I mean, you can't turn off internet.
I mean, they somewhat have.
Yeah, but yet still 21% of all the Bitcoin mining still occurs in China, where it's currently banned. 21% of all the Bitcoin mined is the hash rate is coming out of China, where it's illegal. So, and currency escape is always something that countries contend with. In China, they have a lot of, kind of mechanisms set up in place to kind of regulate how many currency units can escape the system each year, right? Currency escape. It's an issue. And you don't want people leaving with their value, but at a certain point, there's nothing you can do, right? So it's like getting mad at sunsets. You have these uncontrollable, mostly decentralized systems, and there's nothing you can do. You can regulate the on-ramps. You can try to regulate the off-ramps. But when people start accepting these currencies or collateralizing them into loans, there's nothing you can do. Like, I've got Bitcoin parked away. I can murder 45 people, get on a plane, go to Brazil, and start buying houses. There's nothing anyone can do. So they can get mad at it all they want. But again, game theory, cooler heads will prevail, and they will say, there's really nothing to illegalize. It won't make a difference. If I tell you, I'm illegalizing you to think about the color black, you would say, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You can't make me not think of a thing. Same difference. You can make anything you want illegal. There's no way to regulate it. Yeah, so then you go, why are we wasting all of this time? Let's focus on ways to make the digital renminbi a trade asset that's important. They have deals with 140 countries right now to do trade in the digital renminbi. I think that's a big deal. We'll see. I think that's a big deal. And if enough people start using the digital renminbi, then other people are going to start collecting the digital renminbi. Why? Because if you're doing commerce with a country in a certain asset, you just hold the asset. It makes sense. And we will see there will be just currency hegemony, not a specific currency hegemony. So I think it's okay if the US dollar slowly maybe dissipates from being the world's reserve currency and looks more like the Dixie, where it's a part of a bucket of frequently used assets in real time, and hegemony could change 17 times a day. right? Oh, today the renminbi was used more. Oh, today the dollar. Oh, today the pound sterling. Oh, tomorrow the euro. It just depends. And then we'll kind of have a globalization of currencies.
That'll be interesting. So we've been talking kind of at a high level. Actually, we're 10 minutes longer than I said already. You have time for a couple more questions, or?
Of course.
I want to talk about, because one of the things that we talked about last year was that you basically live off your crypto. And, a lot of people think, I store it on the Ledger wallet and I don't know how to touch it. So how are you actually functioning day to day without using a lot of dollars? Because I remember you telling me at one point, you mostly convert paychecks into crypto.
Yeah. So I put every dime. It's a little bit different now, the dynamic, because I have like a few different kind of revenue streams that are not crypto related, or they're crypto adjacent. But the staking rewards that I make in the digital asset space are good. And I've been staking for years, and I just stockpile. So if I ever need currency units, like one of the reasons I like Nexo, the platform, so much is I can go park some currency, some crypto over there, and I can borrow against it and pull cash out. And as long as I'm over collateralized, the cash costs me nothing. It's zero. So I just collateralize a loan against my crypto. They send cash to my bank account that's there that day.
Yeah, that's pretty good. There's also like Coinbase credit cards, and there's a lot of different ways to.
So you're spending some dollars. It immediately gets converted into a Bitcoin, a crypto asset of your choice, and then they just do the transaction. It's just like selling a little bit of XYZ coin for some US dollars. So those are kind of cool too. Although there's some kind of fees associated with that, and I just try to sidestep any kind of fee I can. So 0%. Over collateralized lending to myself makes the most sense. Plus, there's no tax burden on that.
Oh, really? Do you pay it back in crypto, or do you have to send the cash back at some point?
I send the cash back.
All right.
As long as my inputs are higher than my outputs, I'm good. If it goes the other way, then I'm heading for bankruptcy anyway, right? Like how do you go bankrupt? Gradually, then suddenly.
Right. Yeah, it was funny.
That's also how you get rich, by the way.
That's funny. I just did a podcast the other day where I talked about that exact concept that gradually then slowly goes both ways. There's the one last topic I want to touch on is NFTs, because the technology and the concept of NFTs seems so important to me that, like, in the future, all the property deeds will be on NFTs.
Yes.
But right now they're goofy JPEGs that sell for way too much money online. So how do you see it kind of transition from the joke meme type NFT thing to a serious application like worldwide or nationwide?
Well, the whole jokey meme thing is a small group of people mostly trading among themselves. It's not a real market. It's the same way the art market is. It's a small handful of people with a bunch of mostly illiquid assets, and they're just trading them amongst themselves. And occasionally that will hoover up a couple of outsiders, a couple of tourists. But for the most part, it's kind of a very minimal space. But companies are seeing, well, that's cool. You can take a JPEG and assign a token to it, and it can live on, and you can track it, and you can prove its validity. That might make sense for like a receipt or a plane ticket or a movie ticket or anything that needs, or a last will and testament, a legal document, so medical records, school records. So you start seeing all these places where some iteration of non-fungibility could be laid against an existing paper situation and protect the world from some kind of mass event like Library of Alexandria or something where a big dearth of humanity's knowledge just gets smoked away by some vigilantes or some chaos. So it might be nice to protect all of these things in a digital way that could live on in perpetuity and could be managed and checked in these permissioned or semi-permissioned kind of formats. So that just kind of makes sense. And as that becomes more clear, businesses will start implementing, non-fungible ticket tokens and tickets and whatever in whatever way might make business a little easier for them. Like I buy a lot of plane tickets. They send me a thing, an email, here's your ticket, click into this, click into that. If they just sent me an NFT of the ticket and I knew, oh, well, even if I lose it, I can just, they have a record of it. As long as I verify my identity, they have the ticket at the airlines. I just have a QR code. Bing. Oh, it's you. Go ahead. Like, why do we need 17 emails and I have to take a screenshot and the barcode and all this? So there's one easy way to make air travel and whatever more elegant. There you go. So your driver's license could be an NFT and it could be in a record. Why do I need to carry why do I need to carry anything? Why do I need credit cards? Why are there actual physical buttons on stuff? That's another thing. That's a whole boatload of stupid too. And so, but eventually these things will happen as a byproduct of a company seeing a cost reduction or some kind of more elegant product because of this technology. So we're just seeing the early utilization. And yeah, it's mostly gambling right now. But so what? So if a handful of people want to pay exorbitant amounts on monkey JPEGs, it doesn't really affect the rest of us, does it? It's just not, my life is not materially worse because somebody made money on a monkey JPEG to the 6 other dudes that have monkey JPEGs. I don't care. If Mark Cuban paid $200,000 for a monkey JPEG, it doesn't affect my life. But what may affect all of our lives is that, companies will see this behavior and they'll go, hey, is there something there? And if they start asking about this idea of non-fungibility and non-fungible tokens, that could be expressed in products and better software, in the future. And that could make our lives better.
Yeah, I see, some of the concerns that I've heard people talking about are like they're ruining this technology. It's going to become, is it the big crash and none of this artwork's going to be worth anything. And then it's going to push us out 10 years. But I don't think you see that with a lot of these crypto type things. Is you'll start, I think you're right. You'll see a couple small companies start using it. And then an American Airlines or a Ticketmaster or somebody like that will go. And then you'll just see it blow up.
Or Groupon. I mean, there's anything that's paper or that's just a digital photo. If you want to add provenance to it, attach a token to it. Give it some non-fungibility, non-tradability. The idea that, if the Picasso market crashed today, would that materially change your life?
I find it hilarious.
It wouldn't make a difference.
Right.
Oh, people are paying less for Picassos. Oh, no one will ever do art again. No, that's silly. So I think people are looking at a very small space that has a lot of weird behavior, and they're using that to kind of contrive really ridiculous outcomes. And again, reduce it to the simple, reduce it to game theory. What is the old adage in engineering? Everything should be as simple as possible, but no simpler.
Yeah.
Right? There's some JPEGs. A handful of people are paying ridiculous amounts. Some gamblers have come into the space. They think that they can buy one on Friday and sell it by next Thursday and make 10 times their money and just keep going until they're rich. But there's gambling behavior everywhere. There's gambling behavior in equities. There's gambling behavior in crypto. The NFT gambling art space is its own little bubble. Cool. So what? If it continues to just function the way it is, it still doesn't affect the rest of the world. No blow up in NFTs is going to blow. There's no systemic risk that the 16 people in the NFT space are going to somehow create some systemic banking risk. In the same way that when UST and Terra blew up, it didn't create any systemic banking risk. Yeah, idiots got punished as they should, right?
Yeah.
But that was it. Poof, gone.
All right, Nick, it's been an hour and some, and I've had a really good time talking to you. Where can I send people to find out more about you? Watch your Money Morning Show, watch your YouTube show.
So, Money Morning Live, obviously that's always fun. And right now our schedule is Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And I also have a YouTube channel where I repost stuff on a pretty consistent basis. And I do a live show on Monday and Wednesday. And that is Crypto and Coffee live stream.
All right. I'll put links to those in the description. Nick Black, thanks so much for coming on.
Anytime.